Alright, so this team right here, it's just a really hard-hitting team that has Little Ragnaros's Magma Trap, because traps right now are pretty strong. They have a random chance to go off, and when they do, they interrupt the user for that turn. They do as much damage as a basic attack, and they stay stunned until their next turn. So they basically lose 2 turns when Magma Trap goes off, while at the same time taking the same amount of damage as a basic attack. The only downside is that it has a random chance to happen over 9 turns. So it could happen at any point over 9 turns. Sometimes it happens right away, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all, and it just goes off at the end of the 9th turn, which kind of wastes it. But it's a lot of fun when it does go off. Anyways, this team right here, besides Little Ragnaros, just hitting really hard because it's the hardest hitting pet in the game. I also have Crusher, my Suicide intentionally spelled incorrectly, with Shell Armor combo. He's really OP. I don't really need to explain him. And Stout Elemental. I don't really use this guy very often because he's not very good. And it probably wasn't a good idea to put him on the same team with Little Ragnaros, because we're both, that gives me 2 elemental types. Luckily, aquatic type damage isn't very common in PvP. I mean, it's there. It is one of the more used types in PvP, but not as used as like critters or undeads. So there is some, what's that word for it, risk in running both of these guys. And I did run into someone who had a person with aquatic type damage, but I was able to deal with him no problem. Stout Elemental, he has Bubble. Bubble's a really good attack. He has really high attack power. I mean, Bubble's a really good defensive ability that blocks 2 turns. It's basically like a decoy, except it only works on the Stout Elemental, not your team. So your opponent can't break it with AoEs. It's a little bit harder to break than decoy, but it's not as versatile as a decoy, not decoil. His other 2 abilities, Explosive Brew, it's basically like a sticky bomb that hits really hard because he's a high-ass attack power, and it can't be blocked, dodged, or avoided, so they can't use a bubble or a dodge to block it, which is pretty good because it hits pretty hard. And then his other ability, both of them are pretty good actually. I was actually kind of having a hard time deciding which one to use, because Barrel Toss, it's a 2-turn ability, but it hits for 812 damage, which is a lot. And Brew Bolt has a random chance to hit for either 250 or in between up to 470. And at 470, if I hit 2 of those in a row, that's more damage than a Barrel Toss. But even on a pretty high roll for Brew Bolts, if I use 2 of those in a row, they equal a Barrel Toss. So Barrel Toss is pretty good, but like the problem with wind-up abilities is if you use it, your opponent goes down to like a really low health value, and you could just clean them up with 1 basic attack, except I don't have any other basic attack abilities. Well, I guess I do have Explosive Brew, but that takes 3 turns to go off. While if I use Brew Bolt, I'd be able to kill a pet in 3 turns, maybe. While with Barrel Toss, I'd always need 4 turns in order to do, 1600 damage, because he hit twice at 812. While with Brew Bolt, I'd be able to kill him a little bit faster. But then again, I could always charge up a Barrel Toss while my opponent is like in the turn of immunity or something, so there can be cases made for both of them, but I just decided to go with Brew Bolt, and it worked out pretty well. He hits really hard. Alright, so this team we're going against right here, it's another dot team that I went against earlier on another team, so I kind of knew how it works. I'm going to go straight into my Ragnaros, obviously, that way I can set up my Magma Trap, because that Magma Trap is really good. And then I like to go for Sulfur Smash right off the bat, just in case it goes off on the first turn like it did right there. That way I can do extra damage and not have to worry about doing mediocre damage with my Sons of Flames. I switch out right here with my Sons of Flames because I know his entire team's faster than Ragnaros, and I knew he was probably going to switch out. If he didn't switch out, that would have been a bad move right there, but he did, so it totally worked out. I was able to predict him. Plus, I wanted to block the volcano damage, and it worked out perfectly. He's just going for normal hits, and I'm finally back up. I blocked the entirety of that volcano. He goes for the stun, which sucks. That means I take an extra turn of damage. And I'm able to throw out my magma trap again, and now I go for my hard-hitting sulfurous smashes. It's so fun using basic attacks on Ragnaros. It hits as hard as other people would hit with a special ability. Sometimes. It does have that random damage factor. Plus he has a shitty racial, so he's not able to keep attacking for 2 turns. And then I go into my Elemental, who also hits really hard. His basic attack's pretty fun. Not as fun as Ragnaros, where it hits really hard, but it's still pretty cool. And then he goes into his little precious, I think that's what it's called. It's actually really hard to read the names in this tiny little window I'm looking at. And I go for my bubble when his Curse of Doom is about to go off, that way he can't Howl Bomb me. And it looks like I was able to kill him before the Keg Smash even came out, so that was kind of a waste of a turn. So I'm just going to go for Brew Bolts. And I'm just going to keep spamming Brew Bolts on his Cinder Pup that comes out. But it looks like his Cinder Pup is just going to go for Bark Spam. I thought he was just kind of being desperate, but that actually ended up working. He was able to kill me while taking minimal damage. But now I have a full health Crusher who's able to beat him in 1 hit real easily. Alright, now for this next team. It's kind of a Sunlight team, but not a very good one, so I was able to beat it, I think. So obviously I'm going to start off with Ragnaros and try to go for a Magma Trap, but he switches me out right off the bat, which isn't really that big of a deal since all my pets hit hard. And I'm just going to start spamming Brew Bolts because I know he's going to switch out. And then I'm going to throw out my little keg because it hits really hard. It's nice. It has a guaranteed hard-hitting attack. So I want to use it on all of his pets, especially if he switches out like that. See, it took 550 damage in the back row. And then I go into Suicide. I try to set up a Shell Shield, but he gets a crit, which really sucks. Since his entire team's trying to heal up right now. What I really should have done right there was go straight for the dot, but I guess it didn't really matter. Man, he took like no damage from that. I don't know why. Anyways, I throw out my dot. The dot's actually going to work really great since his team has 2 Nature Ward users, and I have an Aquatic dot. So it's basically just going to negate all that damage. Or it would have if Sunlight wasn't out. But that dot is really good. It's one of the reasons I think I do so well, plus the Elemental has Aquatic damage as well. So he switches me out. The Elemental is back out, so I'm just going to throw out another one of those kegs because it did a lot of damage to him in the back row. I think that was one of the reasons he wasn't able to heal up as much. He also has a dot, so I'm going to go for those Brew Bolts, and I'm just going to keep spamming them now since I know what he's doing by this point. I know he was just going for heals, so I decide to actually stay in on the Elemental and not switch out because I know he can hurt me, but I can also hurt him even more since I have higher attack power and we both have a type advantage attack. And man, that Brew hit really hard in the back row over there. So it got really close right there. No, I did die. I was about to say, oh, I barely survived. Now I get killed by the Fiendish Imp's Immolation Ore in the back row. And then this should be the end of him. The thing exploded. I really should just... I would have been better off if I just used a Brew Bolt instead, but whatever. This is kind of a close match, kind of, except for the fact that my Crusher has a huge advantage on that little Fawn because he can't do shit against me. I think he actually tries to go for damage and he only does 6 damage on me for the 2 turns that I fight him. Yep, 4 damage. He did a total of 11 damage to me before kicking the bucket, and now I have to deal with this guy. I know he's going to try to switch me out, so I just go straight for the Body Slam to try to get a whole bunch of damage in on him, because I know Ragnaros doesn't have a good matchup against him, because he can only probably take 1 attack at most before kicking the bucket, so I'm just going to try to use as many as I can, and I get lucky. And that 2 of his burns hit on the low end, so I was able to actually beat him without having to switch into my last pet. Now, this next one. I don't really know what the fuck he's doing. He has a Darkness and a Sunlight. I don't think he actually uses Sunlight though. I guess it does make sense. He can still heal under the Darkness without taking any damage. So obviously I start off with the Magma Trap first, and it goes off pretty soon, which is pretty nice. So this is why I always go for Sulfurous matches after I throw it out, just in case it goes off early like that. And then almost one-shot his MPD with a crit for my Sulfurous Smash. That was great. And then I go straight for Sons of the Flame because I know the decoy is going to come. So I get to just not take damage for 2 turns while doing a whole bunch of damage to his MPD. I'm actually able to kill it and force it to go into its turn of failsafe, and then he switches out because he's like, damn, I really shouldn't have brought out my MPD against the Ragnaros because that was fucking stupid. So I throw out my Magma Trap because it's off cooldown and Magma Trap's really good. He throws out his little seeds, so I don't have to switch out. I have a pet who can block it. So I go into my elemental, that way I can activate my bubble, since it will block the seeds, even though it shows it in the back row. It does hit your active pet. It's like a weird bug that shows the debuff on your pet in the back row, even though it applies to the active pet. So I was able to block his stun with my bubble. He goes into his Bone Serpent. He wastes one of his switch out, which is fine for me, since I had to waste a switch out and a turn to use a defensive move, and then he goes into a lift off, which I was not expecting. I thought I actually had a pretty good matchup, since my elemental type actually gave me a nice advantage against his Nocturnal Strike. And then the bomb goes off when I use my Submerge. I was only going to use this because I knew he had a little bit of health left. I thought this would be a great move to use during his turn of immunity so I wouldn't get hit, but I wasn't expecting the bomb to actually go off right there. So it's kind of a waste, since he was stunned during the 2 turns I did it. But whatever. Lucky for me, this MPD is dumb as bricks. And uses the decoy right there. During the last tail end of my Sons of the Flames, I'm able just to smash him. And I'm like, okay, I've won. I have a pet with type advantage in the back row. And I have a pet that hits really hard. Might as well just throw out a fucking Magma Trap. Why the hell not? And let's switch into my Suicide. He's going to try to heal. I don't really give a shit. And it looks like it goes off right there. I'm able to throw up my dot. It does do less damage since he has that Iron Bark, but I knew it was going to go off. Actually, I didn't know it was going to go off. I just used it anyway because it's pretty strong damage. I don't really like the recoil damage, and I knew I wasn't going to use Shell Armor because this is such a cleanup fight anyway. Using Shell Armor would have been a waste of time, but it looks